My name's Glenn Tozer and I'm the Gold Coast City Councillor for Mudgeeraba, Highland Park and the hinterland. What you're about to see is the second in what I hope will be a series of films about the history of our beautiful region and the people that bring it to life. I hope by telling the stories of pioneering families from generations past, newer families like yours and mine can build on this reputation, creating a legacy for years to come. Today's film tells the story of the people and groups involved in the establishment of the Mudgeeraba Lighthorse, both the regiment and the museum, who worked together to commemorate and remember the acts of the Mudgeeraba Lighthorse in conflicts around the world. 3 generations of the Laver family are involved in this film, and I'd like to thank them for their support of the project. I'd also like to thank Salvador and his team from Digital Cinematics, who again delivered a great project on a very tight budget. If you like what you see and are interested to find out more, the Mudgeeraba Lighthorse Museum is located at the corner of Wurrunggeri Road and Mudgeeraba Road, right down in Talai, next to the Mudgeeraba Showgrounds. The team of passionate volunteers down there would love to tell you more about the stories of the Mudgeeraba Lighthorse and the people and groups involved from our local area. I hope you enjoy the show.
Come on, Will. Hey, Will, come on, mate.
All right.
Nestled in the foothills of the hinterland, next to the historic showgrounds, sits the Mudgeeraba Lighthorse Museum. The museum has been set up on land that used to belong to the Schmidt family, one of the pioneering families of the Mudgeeraba area. Their house and barn has been preserved and is now used as a way to connect the Gold Coast community to the long and proud history of the Lighthorse. The Lighthorse were regiments of mounted infantry, renowned as gallant soldiers, recognised as an important part of Australian military history, credited with helping to turn the tide of World War I in the Middle East. Mudgeeraba and the surrounding areas have a proud history associated with the Lighthorse, and their legacy lives on through the museum. The traditions and history are carried on through the Mudgeeraba Troop, 14th Lighthorse Regiment, who call the museum their home. The community can visit the museum and be immersed in endless stories that make up the Australian Lighthorse legend. One of the most iconic and recognisable traits of the Light Horsemen was the uniform they would wear. From the khaki shirts and the famous slouch hat to the cartridge bandoliers strung across their chest. World War I historian Bob Clinch explains.
Uniforms of the Light Horsemen evolved from after the Boer War. Jacket was a serge, it was a woolen material, fairly rough, very durable. Because it was wool, it had the properties of both insulation for heat and insulation for cold. The bandolier was really a belt that contained pouches to hold ammunition and consisted of 9 pockets in which there were 10 cartridges. and the cartridges were in 2 lots of 5 in stripper clips, so you could quickly open them up, take them out, reload, fire, keep on going. The slouch hat itself came about in a breakaway from the traditional British kind of hat, because the Australian bushman would have worn a broad-brimmed hat which was much more suitable for the climate. Now the feathers came to be introduced as an adornment. Apparently when the troopers were returning to their barracks, they shot an emu and decided to put the emu feathers in the turned-up slouch hat and went back to their camp. And the commanding officer said, "No boys, that's no good." And then he thought, "Oh, that's a damn good idea." So if you saw a soldier with a fur felt hat with the side turned up with emu feathers, you would know straight away he was Australian and light horse.
Even to this day, the Australian khaki felt hat and the emu plumes are one of the most revered symbols of the light horse. Perhaps the most important element of the light horse story were the horses themselves. Typically the horses that were used were called whalers, and they were known for being fast, strong, and able to cope with the harsh conditions of battle in the Middle East.
The horses were tough because they were bred out in the back blocks. Most of them came from New South Wales, many came from Queensland, but they were very nimble, very intelligent, quick to respond, and became used to the military way, rifle firing and so on, and so could adapt quite easily to that situation.
The resilience and strong nature of these horses allowed them to carry substantial loads for long distances in the Syrian heat for hours at a stretch.
The total weight that the horses had to carry was 112 kilogram. Of that, you had 59 kilogram, the average weight of a rider. You had 18 kilogram of horse equipment and the rest 35 kilogram of trooper equipment.
They carried everything from bandoliers of ammunition to rifles. Quite a heavy weight for many, many days.
The horses and the troopers, they relied on each other. And so you had a very strong bond between the horse and the rider.
They were there together, thick and thin. And then when the Middle East crisis ended, they couldn't bring them home. And then they had the heartbreaking task of getting rid of the horses. So it must have been pretty traumatic for young light horsemen to leave their horses behind, because they were their best mates. Even up until a few years ago, there were old men that still hadn't got over the trauma to leave their horse behind in the Middle East. There was 136,000 horses left, and only one came back.
Mudgeeraba and the surrounding areas were primarily bush and farmlands around the time World War I broke out. The men of the area were known for their horsemanship, which made them prime candidates for the light horse. A local Mudgeeraba farmer by the name of Bill Laver was one such man in the area who decided to take up arms and join the light horse. His son Bill Laver, a Mudgeeraba pioneer himself, explains.
The Mudgeeraba district was very much different to what it is now. This area where we are now here was a farm.
Many men throughout southeast Queensland who became part of the light horse story came from the bush. Their natural skills on the back of a horse and their ability to adapt to harsh environments made them well suited to the rigours of serving in active duty.
Most people rode a horse in those days, and you ride a horse from as soon as you start walking, really, you know. Dad had a farm down here, and he was a very good horseman, and he was a very good rifleman, being on a farm, and he just joined the light horse, and he was accepted, and away he went.
Recruitment for the light horse began in 1914 for the war against Germany in World War I. The 14th Regiment of the Light Horse recruited men from a wide area across southeast Queensland. From Mudgeeraba out to the Granite Belt, up to the northern suburbs of Brisbane, men from all walks of life volunteered to serve as part of the Light Horse Brigade.
With recruitment posters, a lot of it had to do with drumming up the Australian spirit to defend the motherland. A major draw card would have been the notion of joining your mates and having sport. So the posters were specifically arranged and designed to attract young men to defend the motherland.
The Lighthorse always had a bit of, well at that time, had a bit of romance and people desired to be a member of the Lighthorse. You know, they went off to defend what they saw as the king and country.
But they didn't realise really what they were letting themselves in for, because they thought it was just an adventure, and of course the Lighthorse were sort of held in high esteem because, you know, being on a horse, there's something special about it, and they flocked to it. They created a legend.
The rifles that the light horsemen used were Lee Enfield 303 caliber rifle.
They carried 2 double bandoliers with 10 rounds of each on either side, plus one around the horse's neck.
And the availability to quickly load from the stripper clips, the Australian light horse had tremendous firepower. The bayonet was 17¼ inches long and could easily and quickly be clipped onto the nose cap of the 303 rifle so that when it was attached it would be used as an attacking, charging firearm.
The moment in history that would come to define the Lighthorse story was the Battle of Beersheba. This battle encapsulated the bravery, courage and determination that the men of the Lighthorse were so known for. Across the burning sands of the Sinai Desert, some 800 troopers charged over 4,000 entrenched Turks and Germans to seize the town. The battle was the world's last great cavalry charge and helped to change the course of World War I.
October 31, 1917, when Chauvel's troops attacked the Turkish emplacement at Beersheba, the idea was to drive the Turks back further north past Damascus.
The British forces tried to take Beersheba in the morning and they couldn't take them because they withstood their action. So at about 3 o'clock, the commanders had a meeting and they said, let the Aussies at them.
The Battle of Beersheba, the way it was enacted was because the regiments were desperate and needed to get to the water quickly.
And the horses hadn't had proper water there. The light horsemen were actually feeding the water out of their canteens in their hat to the... So the horses were thirsty, they could smell the water, and when they let them go, the noise of 800 Australians charging and the plumes and the men yelling, and they reckoned it was just terrifying. And the Turks and the Germans didn't lower their guns quick enough because they thought they were going to stop, and they got in underneath the fire and got there.
The daring method of charging the trenches on horseback proved to be a successful strategy, with only 35 men losing their lives in the charge. It proved to be a significant victory for the British Empire, with enemy supply lines through the Middle East now cut off.
And the story is that the order was not to enter Damascus because they wanted Lawrence of Arabia and the British contingent to enter the city as triumph victors. But the only way to stop the Germans was to go through Damascus, so the Australians went into Damascus. The people saw the kings of feathers arriving, so they got all the wine that they'd hidden. They got it out and they had trestles set up in the streets and they had this huge party. So the Aussies that didn't mind to drink on a hot day accommodated them. So they had this big party, and then when they finished they rode off to block the Turks and Germans out the other side of Damascus. Lawrence of Arabia and the British contingents arrived for sort of 8 hours later and everyone's asleep because they'd had such a good time.
The Battle of Beersheba is now weaved into the fabric of the story that is the Australian Lighthorse. As a way of carrying on the traditions of the Australian spirit, the Mudgeeraba 14th Lighthorse Regiment was established. The reenactment troop was set up on Australia Day 1980. Their aim was to demonstrate their forefathers' skills on horse and at arms, at special ceremonies and in competitions.
The council, the Gold Coast City Council, after the amalgamation, they bought the Smith House, which was the oldest house that I'm aware of in the district, and I thought it was a very good thing they did. And the Lighthorse Regiment were looking for a home, and they got the council to lease them this area. They would take part in Anzac Day and any community event at all. that the Lighthorse Regiment would be there, you know, and they're very much a part of the community.
I'd come from out west and I went to the Mudgeeraba show and I saw these light horsemen there and I thought, what a great thing to keep alive, the spirit of Australia alive, you know. And that's where it started in 1987.
The Mudgeeraba Troop, 14th Lighthorse Regiment, is world renowned for their extraordinary talents, performing reenactments of the Lighthorse drills. They have won countless awards and are inspiring young generations to remember the legacy and the spirit of the Lighthorse.
And Ray Edwards asked me to come down here and said they were trying to set up a museum, which I thought was a great idea. And so he asked me, did I have any memorabilia? And so I brought down and put my father's memorabilia in there, and those feathers, which my father was very proud of, because he reckoned they were the best feathers in the regiment. I'm very pleased to see the Lighthorse here at Mudgeeraba and very pleased to see the museum. I think it's a good thing that the younger people should be aware of what has occurred in the past.
Through the work of the troop and the museum, the community continues to have a place to honour the heritage of the Australian Lighthorse. This important piece of Mudgeeraba community ensures that future generations will remember the sacrifices made by the men and women who have served our country during times of conflict.
The success of the Lighthorse and the success of the museum is not the achievement of just one person. There are a lot of people that put a lot of time and effort and energy into it. And as time goes by, we want to try and see that it remains. In fact, I think it's essential in the community that people recognise what happened in the past and remember that.